Good morning, or I guess when this actually does finally upload, it'll be afternoon. My name is Benjamin, and today I want to talk about Sanders, who officially declared yesterday. There we go. Okay. Actually, and go, not a blank map. Actually, we'll use a blank map for this one. There we go. There we go. Let me get the safe states out of the way. The states that I don't think anyone is going to disagree with, no matter how ardent a supporter you are of either of these candidates. Okay, don't think that first district would flip. I'll talk about Texas. And you'll see why I have polling up. Talk about North Carolina and Georgia. Indiana. Okay, so we're going to be using this, and again, safe is my category for I am 100% confident that there's no way that the other candidate will win this unless something goes horribly, 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 horribly wrong for that candidate. Likely is they're probably going to win it. It would take a decent sized victory by their opponent in order to carry that state. Leans means it's competitive and it could go either way if there's even just a small error in polling. Tilt is the state is a true toss-up or the vote is a true toss-up, but it's extremely competitive and I'm just picking a side so that way I don't have true toss-ups in my map. And Sanders' announcement came as a bit of a shock, and I pulled up this Harper poll conducted on behalf of these people. Yeah, Sanders kind of lost his moment in 2016. Now, obviously, the Democrats are suffering from what I describe as too many candidates right now, or primary syndrome, or whatever you want to call it. Basically, once the primary is over, I fully expect those numbers to narrow, because that's just the nature of the beast. Now, I expect the Republican, or more accurately, Donald Trump, I expect his numbers to increase as well, because this is below what you would expect. Hilariously, you've also got some reasonably high amounts of undecideds. You know, you've got 18 here, 19 here, 21 here, 20 here. 20% are undecided, essentially. So that's a lot of ground, but it does indicate that Trump starts off with an advantage, especially when you look at the more progressive candidates. Your Booker, who isn't as progressive as he would like to claim, versus Kamala Harris. Yeah. Bernie Sanders, again. Biden is the only one to come within sniffing distance of 40%. You know, so I would actually say that this is reasonable, not reasonable, but it does indicate that, yeah, the South still doesn't like progressives, and I could make the argument that North Carolina, you should have high confidence in projecting North Carolina for Donald Trump if Sanders is the nominee, which means that you can reasonably predict that Texas might be out of reach for Sanders. Now, I don't have polls from elsewhere yet, But that is a very interesting, but that is something that we can use to base at least states like Virginia and Florida. You can at least use those to base your conclusions on those states, as well as Texas on. Let me pull up. There was one. I'm going to select. There was Iowa. A general election. Let's go down here. Trump beat Sanders, and there's only 1% undecided here. I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume that that's an accurate poll, and that would indicate that, yeah, I would tilt Iowa in his favor, and according to my model, Ohio is slightly more Republican-leaning than Iowa. Nebraska's 2nd congressional district is full of moderate Republicans. I don't think Sanders could pull that even in a competitive election. But if Sanders does win the primary, it's probably not going to be the way he would have won in 2016, where he created a groundswell. He would have had to piss off a lot of progressives in order to do it, because he would have had to show that Booker wasn't a progressive. He would have had to make an argument that he, rather than Kamala Harris, an old white male, has to beat out a young, telegenic, aggressive, sharp-witted, mixed, not mixed race, but, female. He would have to beat out Elizabeth Warren, who does have some ability to win. I am skeptical of it, but I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. He has to beat a ton of progressives who are either younger than him, more telegenic than him, appeal to more constituencies than him. It's not going to be as simple and pretty and clean as it would have been in 2016, where all he had to do was defeat Hillary Clinton. Arizona, I'm going to give that one to Trump just for the... I really don't think Arizona would be on the table if Sanders was the nominee. And then this is where we start getting into the toss-up states. I can see Trump winning the Rust Belt against Sanders because he's the incumbent, but for the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to actually say that Minnesota would be likely for Sanders. Michigan would definitely easily lean, if not be likely. I'll even lean Wisconsin. Pennsylvania would be a bit of a tilt. As my model shows, Pennsylvania may be more Republican than Wisconsin, mathematically speaking. But here's the so what we now have is, a few toss-up states. We've got Nevada, Colorado, and actually I'm going to put Colorado in the it'd just be barely in the likely column. It is definitely moving into the category of just being a blue state. You've got Nevada, Virginia, Florida, New Hampshire, and 2 votes in Maine. I'm actually going to put this 1st congressional district only in the lean. I know Trump won there by almost 10% in 2016, but Sanders is a New Englander, and that will resonate well even if it is a more conservative district. People like to vote for their own. It's just the nature of the beast. And I think that would be enough to make the statewide vote, the at-large, a likely vote. And I'm not even going to talk about New Hampshire in any serious sense because New Hampshire is a New England state. Sanders would probably carry it just because of regional, a small regional pull. So now we go on to Nevada, Virginia, and Florida. I'm going to tilt, this is weird because we saw Bill Nelson and Andrew Gillum lose in Florida in the midterms, and this is and they were supposed to win by what would be comfortable margins for Florida, essentially. And Andrew Gillum is a progressive. Sure, he had some ethics concerns, but those really were never talked about in a serious light when it came to his ability to win. Most people thought it was meaningless, or at the very least, he would win anyway. But no, he wound up actually losing by more than Bill Nelson, and I think that indicates, along with the rest of the South, that Florida is not quite progressive territory. You know, it's got a lot of old school Democrats still living, and when I say old school, I'm talking 80s, 90s Democrats rather than, you know, 50s, 60s Democrats. Because Florida has people from other states, but they're typically older people from northern states who tend to be a bit more moderate if they're Democrats and tend to be a bit more conservative if they're Republicans. And in all honesty, I think this, combined with Trump having some pull there, it is technically his second home. He's done all his presidential retreats in Florida, and it seems Florida Republicans do minority outreach extremely well. And whether that's because of the large Cuban population in the Miami-Dade area, you be the judge of that. But I don't think it's outside possibility that an incumbent president could win Florida even against an extremely popular Sanders. And by the way, Sanders' popularity will go down through the course of the campaign, but also during the course of a general. You know, he's at his ceiling right now. And he's got a long way to tumble, especially if Trump is able to use socialism as a boogeyman, which, at least amongst moderates and Republicans, that's a great idea. And if he can drive turnout among Republican and Republican-leaning voters by using the socialist boogeyman, he might win more than what I'm expecting, but I'm thinking that it's going to be a little bit softer than I personally would like to see it. Nevada, I'm just going to lean it to Sanders. It's just become the trend for Nevada to show that it's maybe more Republican than people think, but then vote Democrat. So I'm leaving it with them. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. And now Virginia decides the election. Old Dominion decides. And here's the thing. I've lived in all three parts of this of Virginia. You know, I'm originally from Georgia, but, you know, I've lived in all three parts of Virginia. And here's what I noticed. The Sanders just wasn't popular. It's not that people don't like him. I don't think that's his problem. People love Sanders. I think the problem with Sanders is he identifies as a socialist. And in Virginia, that's probably not a good idea. You've got a ton of government workers here. You have, and when I say government workers, Virginia has a very, very, very large military population. And almost everything is tied to the military, especially near Aberdeen, the Aberdeen Proving Grounds, which is where a lot of new military technology gets, well, it's in the name, proved. So you cut funding to the military, that's mostly coming from research and development, and people around Aberdeen, they're not going to like it. Yeah, Aberdeen is in Virginia, I think. I should know that. I really should know that. I'm pretty sure it's in Virginia, though. Fort Eustis, Fort Lee. No, Fort Lee is somewhere else. But there's military posts all over the state, and outside of outside of Hampton Roads in Norfolk, as well as Northern Virginia, the state is rural and Republican as all get out. And if you look at the incorporated cities, most of them, yes, do vote Democrat, but there are some reasonably sized cities in the state that vote Republican. Look at Salem right by Roanoke, which is, sure, it's a Democratic city, but Roanoke is. But it's not as Democrat as you would expect. There's that one rural but still voting Democrat county, but you can make the argument that's because of Virginia Tech, but it's only lightly, and the people out here, they don't like progressives, particularly they don't like progressive policies. They believe that the politicians who endorse them mean the best. They just don't like the policies, if that makes any sense. Let's see. But I can hear arguments both ways that Virginia is just it's too far gone for Republicans to win it. Or I can hear arguments that Sanders is just too progressive for the state. And my inclination is that, yeah, Sanders is just too progressive for the state. You know, people forget that Hillary Clinton was actually in danger of losing the state, and at least mathematically speaking, Tim Kaine is what put her over the top. On average, the vice president lends about a 3% swing, which means you have to win by 3% in order to not have the vice presidential nominee matter. And Virginia was right on that edge. Like I said, I think she actually needed Tim Kaine to carry Virginia. I doubt Sanders would pick Tim Kaine or any other Virginian. Also, there is potential that the current scandals in Virginia regarding Northam, Fairfax, and I forget the name of the Attorney General, but all three of them, could affect the state politically, saying, really? And you're going to call your opponents racist? Really? Of course, a lot of the leaders are willing to forgive them, but we all know that if they were Republicans, they would have been drawn and quartered. But then again, that's the leadership groups in the Democratic donor base, rather than the average people who the average people are mad because they've kind of made Virginia a bit of a joke. They have made Virginia a bit of a joke. So I'm not sure what to call this state, but because I'm not going to leave anything as a toss-up, I'm going to tilt it towards Donald Trump, which would put the election in his hands. It would be narrow, but again, I'm also factoring in that Trump would probably have a little bit of an advantage because it's also still a southern state. Virginia is part of the South, whether or not other southern states want to agree to let in a blue state. But no, Virginia is a southern state, so, and as we've seen, progressive politics just don't fly in the South. I think Stacey Abrams' relative success in Georgia is not due to her progressive politics. I think she just did a very good job of driving turnout in certain groups. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to say it like it's a bad thing. And I think Beto O'Rourke, his success was mostly due to Ted Cruz being horribly, horribly unpopular, or at the very least polarizing. Plus, it was a very high-profile race. He managed to make it the most expensive Senate race in history, or something like that. He had a lot of help. If people didn't want to unseat Ted Cruz as much, like if he had Cornyn levels of popularity, O'Rourke just doesn't come close to winning. He probably loses by maybe 10, 15%, somewhere in that range, instead of just narrowly losing. And again, I think part of it's because he was going up against a fairly weak candidate. But I wouldn't be too shocked if any of these states that I've tilted or have leaned go the other direction. And remember that when I do my predictions, this is kind of like saying that. Now, this is what I think would be the most likely outcome, but I'm going to give a quick range. So the most I could see Donald Trump winning by is, and I'll just use the safe colors for this, just to make it easier to see what I'm doing. This is about the most I could see Donald Trump winning by, is 293, 245. And there are scenarios where, yes, I do see Sanders winning. But I don't see him winning by as much as some people would. Yes, I can see him winning Virginia. I could see him winning Florida. Iowa isn't that much of a stretch. I think Ohio is, but it would be a very narrow loss. So 224, 314. In between, somewhere in that range. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Bye.